Am I supposed to be in the floor? I don't think I am. Is the Steam Deck good at playing video games? Now, obviously I would hope so, considering it's marketed as a gaming device. But, considering it's using the SteamOS 3.0 as opposed to Windows, there's a lot of Windows games that may not necessarily work properly on SteamOS. So, the question obviously then being is, well, not only can it play Windows games, but more importantly, how good is it as an actual gaming device? Because Valve marketed it both as a gaming device and a PC. Is it actually good as both? Does it actually work as a gaming console, or is it still as jank as Windows can be? Well, let's get into the video and find out. Also, like and subscribe. Right, welcome to the actual game testing part of the video. So, how I plan to structure this is what's called library filters. So you have verified only, verified playable, verified playable, and then all games. What I'm going to do first, I'm going to play the verified games, because hopefully Valve have actually tested these games so that they work just fine on the deck without any issues. And obviously then I'll do the playable games, and then the untested games, and then ones that aren't officially supported, ones that Valve say are not supported, just to see how well they work. I'm only going to do about 4, maybe 5 games of each category, otherwise we'll be here forever. Maybe at the end of the video or on Twitter or something I'll explain how well other games I've tested work, you know, just give like a brief summary of that, as you don't need to see every single game on a video. So first what we're going to do, as I said, we're going to go to the verified only games. So here I've got quite a few downloaded. Oh, which one should we try first? One thing I will say about Rocket League is that when you have it on an SD card, it might be the same with all games, but I've only tested it really on Rocket League, it actually lags a bit. Not really lags, but you get a lot of stutter when you use it on an SD card. Like, it's not that noticeable, but you will notice some hitches, some stuttering, so that's something to keep in mind if you're intending to play off an SD card. First, let's go with Sonic Mania. I don't know how well you can see it, but I've also got a lot of statistics in the corner as well, so... Oh, the music for this game is just amazing. You can't not just sit there and listen to it. But as you can tell, runs absolutely fine. And again, you might be saying, well, of course it runs fine. It's verified by Valve. But wait a bit. That's not necessarily the case, as much as you would assume. But yeah, I've played probably at least an hour of Sonic Mania on the Steam Deck now, which is, I know it's not a whole lot, but so far I haven't run into any issues whatsoever. Like, maybe very occasionally the odd frame rate drop or the odd thing, but as you can see from here, ooh, they're going to a special stage now. This is with FSR off as well. Obviously, Sonic Mania runs at like 200p anyway, technically speaking. I haven't seen a single drop in frame rate or frame rate stutter or anything. This is probably the hardest mode in the game to run anyway, so if this runs just fine, then yeah, the entire game runs just fine, obviously. And again, I would hope so, because this is on the Switch as well, and that pretty much flawlessly on the Switch, so if it didn't run here, that'd be very worrying, but yeah, runs absolutely fine. Now, the next one I wanted to try is Super Hot Mind Control Delete. I think it should be the same with the base Super Hot game. There was something that was really weird that happened when I played this last time. Again, this is a deck verified game, so apparently Valve made sure that it works. Right, okay, fair enough. Oh, why am I there? Okay, are they supposed to be in the floor? Am I supposed to be in the floor? I don't think I am. That's weird. Okay. Well, when I played this before as well, one of the really weird things that happened is that all the controller inputs just stopped working. Even like the, you know, on-screen mouse, or like the mouse controls stopped working. One of the only things that actually kept working, touchscreen. Okay, yeah, it's hard to focus on this. Oh, why am I getting 150 FPS out of it? Oh, that's good, I guess. So far, it seems to be working pretty well. Yeah, see, I'm not through the floor now, so I don't know what happened there. But you see what I mean? Like, it might be working fine now, but even verified games may just occasionally glitch. Right, so I was just tweaking with the settings a bit, and for some reason the VSync just broke. So I had to go into the settings, turn VSync off, and then turn it back on, and now it's at a solid 60. But otherwise, it was going to like 400 FPS in the menus, and it was like 120 in game, which sounds great, but because the screen can do 60, and the system's designed around 60 FPS, in reality, that's just wasting performance. So I don't know what was going on there. Octopath Traveler is another game that I've been really meaning to get into, and I want to try that on the Steam Deck as well, and yeah, it's running absolutely fine. Now again, this is also a game that's on the Switch, and funnily enough was specifically designed to be on the Switch, so kind of ironic that it's now here on the Steam Deck at running at twice the frame rate. I don't know how well you can tell, but yeah, the GPU is being basically maxed out here, so it's not like it's having a break or anything with this kind of game. But yeah, we are running at literally double the frame rate to the Switch version, so that goes to show that when a game is properly optimized, you can see just how much performance you can get from the Steam Deck. And yeah, I'm just going to wait until I finish this battle and then walk around the town a bit more. There we go. There are very occasional hitches, although I can't even really tell. There might be something I encounter later on, but for the most part, this is actually a really solid experience. Yeah. I was messing around in the settings, so I was trying to get it at like the highest resolution, highest settings, and yeah, I think I broke it. Whoops. Right, I just did the Steam command -windowed to put it into windowed mode and it works fine. So apparently full screen on this is completely broken and don't ever touch it. Apparently. And finally, for the verified games, last but not least, we have Bug Fables. So Bug Fables obviously isn't the hardest game on the planet to run, but it will definitely give your system a run for its money if it really wants to. Let's put it to 720p, yeah, FSR off, because we want to actually test the performance of the system. Smooth 60 FPS. I was running this on a MacBook Pro. Like, I did a video on that MacBook Pro as well, but I was running this on there, and it was literally like, what, 20 FPS or something ridiculous? To be fair, it's like 6 years old now, but still, it's really, yeah. But this is running 800p, 60 FPS, absolutely fine, and it actually allows you to choose different resolution options, which surprisingly a lot of these games don't. You can actually run it at, you know, 500p with FSR if you want a bit of extra battery, and you still get about the same looking resolution. So overall, the verified games are actually working as Valve said so, so I'm quite surprised. Even Superhot actually ran well, even though when I tried it before, it didn't work well. So now I wasn't actually going to try any more Great on Deck or Deck verified games for this video, but one thing that I actually did find really interesting, I was playing Journey in bed last night, and one thing that really interested me is, even though I do have it on the highest settings, so I have it at 800p, all the settings on max pretty much, it's actually using way more of system resources than I thought it would. It's like surprisingly intensive. So at the moment, as you can see, I don't know how well you can see that, but the GPU is being used at like 100% and the CPU is being used about 60%. 25 watts has been taken from the battery for the entire system. So in other words, this is about as intensive as it gets for the system. What I thought is, because this is the most intensive game that I've seen so far, I'm going to leave it on and see how long battery lasts for, because I thought it'd be quite an interesting battery test to see the worst case scenario for the system. Well, 5 minutes ago it was at 100%, so it's probably not going to last very long. But as you can see with the temperatures, so if you're wondering what the worst case scenario is, like you're probably running on like GTA 5 or Elden Ring or something like really intensive, you'll be getting roughly about 80 on the CPU and about 70 on the GPU. The highest I've seen it is about 90 on the CPU and 80, mid 80s on the GPU, so I would be careful running those kind of games in a hot environment, because my room was relatively cold, so it wasn't too bad for me. But yeah, just keep that in mind. But most games it was only at 70, so the CPU would be absolutely fine. And to be fair, with a laptop CPU or GPU, anything above 90 is when you should worry, but anything below that is actually alright. Apparently even 100 degrees should be fine. So, oh, one more thing, Journey runs actually really well, even though it's at full settings, 800p, and this is with FSR off, it's running at a solid 60. Very occasionally there might be some stutter, but for the most part it runs absolutely fine. You probably wouldn't even notice it without the frame rate counter on. Even with FSR, I did try FSR because you can change the resolution in this game. Even then, it didn't really make much of a difference. I'm guessing because it's more of a CPU than a GPU issue at the moment. Honestly, I wouldn't worry too much about playing a game like this. Also, this is how the Steam Deck sounds at its absolute worst. Again, unless you're in bed, you probably wouldn't even notice it. It does get loud. It certainly does. It's not quiet by any means when it's at full pelt. But again, it's kind of like a, you know, a standard laptop. So it's not like it's really bad or anything. And I think it's alright, especially again if you have headphones on or you're using the speakers, you probably wouldn't even notice it that much. So here we are, we're almost an hour into the battery test. What I thought I would do is I'd give a quick gameplay test, because I've been doing this, as I just said, for an hour now, so this would be good to see how well it performs under load and to see if it's thermal throttle at all and if it can sustain performance for more than an hour. And so far, yeah, I can't tell if there's any frame rate drops. If it was thermally constrained or if it was thermal throttling at all, the performance should be dipping quite significantly. But no, not at all. So if you're worried about, you know, long, I don't know, Elden Ring sessions, because that's the big game at the moment, or long sessions of whatever game you want to play, doesn't seem like an issue at all. Though I will say that an hour in, the battery life is just over 30%. So it seems like an hour and a half is what you can expect for games that take all of the system resources. Right, it's literally just at 2%, so I was trying to set up the camera. Didn't quite think it'll go down quite that quickly, but yeah. It lasted 1 hour and 25 minutes at full pelt. I'm sure you could make it even worse battery life if you really tried to. At most intents and purposes, look, if I try and turn the system on, it's not turning on, so it's officially died. If you're wondering how long you could play the most intensive games for, an hour and 25 minutes, roughly. So for reference, if it shows 4%, that means you have to plug it in immediately, and if it shows 2%, that means the battery's gonna die. Does it keep my gameplay session open? Well, I guess it looks like it's closed, so I was kind of hoping that it would do something similar on Windows where it would hibernate the system so that you could go back to where you left off when it gets charged again, but unfortunately no. Once it's dead, anything you did is now gone, so you better save before that. And now we're into the second part of the video, that being where I test games that are labelled as playable. So you can see here, verified and playable. Valve says they're playable, but they might need some extra tweaking, or they might need like touchscreen inputs or whatever, but for the most part they should actually, you know, work just fine. So first, what I want to try is BeamNG. Now this will be really interesting because it's not always the best experience using a controller. Like, I think the actual driving itself, but the menus certainly aren't. Let's give this one a go and see how it runs. Don't know if I've talked about loading times before, but loading times are alright. Some games, much like on Steam itself, will require extra things to run in the background and stuff. Oh, Steam plus X, right, that's the on-screen keyboard. Okay, cool. An older version. So SteamOS actually does seem to handle menus and pop-ups quite well. I thought that half the pop-ups just wouldn't work at all, but it does seem to actually focus on the pop-ups as well, so that's pretty good. Okay, here we go. So let's just go to a free roam map. Obviously with mods do actually work through Steam Workshop, so you can actually do that. Obviously your mileage may vary, some things may not work, some things might work, so I'm just not going to do any mods. I'm just going to do the standard experience. So Beam does take a while to load in, so this is normal. I mean, this is interesting, so you've got both 100% of the GPU and almost 100% of the CPU as well. Right, there we go, we are fully loaded in now. So the performance is not fantastic. We are seeing sub 60 FPS or about in the mid 40s. To be fair, it's definitely more than playable. I'm not saying that the optimization's bad as such, but it's definitely not the best optimized game out there. And especially being a proper open world racing game, or open world-ish. And I've already crashed. That's great. That's an excuse to get into the menus, I guess. Okay, so this does actually have a proper controller menu, because last time I played it, it was just mouse only, so that's cool. Let me see if I can spawn a new vehicle. Oh, I thought we were actually stuck in the tree then. Okay, the lag. Where's the lag coming from? Wow, okay, must have just been loading the car, I guess. Can we not fall down the cliff, please? No? Can we? Oh, okay. You could say this is going swimmingly. Okay, I'm sorry. What? Why would you spawn the car underground? I'd really like a keyboard attachment for the Steam Deck. There's a decent amount of games that don't allow you to just use the on-screen stuff. So it is running 800p, but it's only running at normal settings, so the performance isn't great. Definitely playable, don't get me wrong. Performance could be better. For some of the menus in BeamNG, you have to use the touchscreen, but that's not too bad. Right, and we're back. I had to restart the stage because for some reason I couldn't just get the vehicle to spawn. It looks really nice at normal settings, actually. There is like a decent amount of like stuttering and lag and stuff, so it's not perfect, but it is more than playable. Ooh, I think I might have crashed. So at least it allows you to change the settings, because some games don't. So here I'm trying BeamNG, but it's at 540p instead of the native 800p. I'm using FSR to upscale it up to 800p, and it doesn't actually give that much of a performance difference. Like, you may get a couple of extra FPS, but less than you'd expect. I think the reason being is because this game's more CPU bound than GPU bound. Like, the CPU in the Steam Deck isn't exactly great. It's fine, but it's not great by any means. You're not actually that much better off using FSR in a game like this. To be fair, the option is there, and apart from more aliasing, it looks about the same. Like, it looks better than you'd think it would be. And again, you can always go into the quick settings, change how sharp it is. You can either turn the sharpening right down, or you can turn the sharpening way up. Now, the next game I wanted to try is Muck, and one of the interesting reasons why is because this is a game that doesn't actually support controller natively, and as you can see, it's doing really decently. So the left stick is mounted to the mouse, and the right stick is mounted to WSAD. So you've got X as E here, you've got A as spacebar, I'm guessing, and then you have Y as, was it Q? Something like that, and actually it is working surprisingly well. Like, you would think that mapping it to a keyboard interface wouldn't work that great, but it does. This is at 800p on ultra settings, and we're quite easily getting about 50 FPS from this. So it does dip a little bit, but considering this is ultra settings, you could quite easily put the settings down if you really wanted to, and you could play it at, you know, a solid 60 FPS. Or you could even just lock it to 30 and get a bit of extra battery life out of it. And you can see it's taking about 20 watts as well, so it's definitely pushing the system. There are the very occasional hitches and stuff, especially when you're moving the camera. We are running absolutely fine here. FSR is a little bit fiddly to get going, but once you set it up, as you can see, it's in 16:9 at the moment, not 16:10. Running it at 540p, and besides a very hard to notice shading glitch, I think, now it's running at a pretty much solid 60 FPS, and I can barely tell any difference, to be honest. Everything does look ever so slightly sharper, but besides that, it looks almost identical, and at that point, you're basically just getting 3 FPS. If you're playing this, you can set it up, you might as well just use FSR. But basically what I had to do is I went to the settings, then obviously video. Normally, if I click apply, as you can see, FSR turns off, which is really weird. And then sometimes it just doesn't grab the mouse, so then I have to go like this and then that, and then it works again. What you have to do is you go into settings, you go into video, and then what you do is you go to full screen window, whatever, and then go back to exclusive full screen, and then FSR is applied. So you have to do that, and then you can get 540p in this. Unless you really want the higher resolution, I really don't see the point in doing so. Now, Flatout 2 is the next game that I wanted to try, and why this is particularly interesting is because not only is it a really old game, from literally like 2006, so it's definitely going to give, you know, this system a run for its money in terms of compatibility, but also it only has this once, so you have to set it right the first time, otherwise you've got to go into a bunch of configuration settings or literally reinstall the game. So it will be really interesting here to see how well this game runs. There's literally no point in using FSR on this because of how old it is. It runs on pretty much anything that can run the actual game itself, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. Anyway, let's see how well it handles this. That's where I first heard about NVIDIA, so that's why I always call it NVIDIA, because some people call it NVIDIA, but because of this particular splash screen, I call it NVIDIA. It's also ironic this is sponsored by NVIDIA when it's running on AMD hardware, but there we go. Also, I'm probably going to have to put this on mute or something, because it has copyrighted music, so I'll probably get destroyed for doing that. Hello? Anything? Oh, well, this is fantastic, isn't it? I can't even get past the main menu, because I don't know what the start button is.
3 days later.
Right, so I found a configuration that works for me. The problem is that if I go to here and go to controller settings, right, here it says official layout for Flatout 2 gamepad, so by Bugbear Entertainment, the people who make the game, or at least made the game. So you'd think that the official layout would work, but it doesn't. And the reason why it doesn't work, and the reason why, if I go back, I made my own template, is because the game only accepts controller inputs when you're actually in game. The menus don't. So what I've done is I've used the L4 and R4, the buttons on the back. I've used those as the left and right key, and then I've got R5 and L5 as enter and escape, respectively. What that does is basically means that I also did the right trackpad as the arrow keys. So what that does is that means that I can navigate the menus, but I don't actually need to switch to a different controller layout, which is good. And yeah, especially those buttons on the back come in really clutch for games like this, which don't support all games, obviously. Because I can get through the menus, I can go to this menu here, configure controls, so that I can actually map these button inputs to the game itself. Otherwise, it wouldn't normally do that. So it is a bit annoying that the official layout doesn't work properly. You'd still have to put in a mouse and keyboard, to make this work, or configure it yourself. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm having to configure it myself. But at least you have the buttons on there, so you can configure it yourself and have both keys for the menu as well as not take up any of the actual controller ports. Right, here we are. We're actually in gameplay now. So I still have to use the escape and the enter key to actually go through the menus again. But as you can see, I'm playing the game absolutely fine. Like, this does support, I think, a 360 controller, so you can map this. Whoa, you actual watermelon. Wow. So you can actually still map the Steam Deck controllers as if it's, you know, an Xbox 360 controller, so that's fine. But again, these controls only work in game. They don't work in the menus, so I still have to use the back keys in order to get into the menus. I mean, you couldn't even get into the game, so Bugbear, come on, man. At the very least, map the mouse and or other keys to get into this game, but you can't just say it's the official controller layout, and people can't even get into the game without configuring the controls themselves. But anyway, what I'll do is, if somehow you're watching this and you actually have a Steam Deck, I'll upload my configuration to the Steam files or whatever it uploads to, so that you can take advantage of this as well. The game's running absolutely fine, as you can see. I mean, it's not even taking 100% of the GPU, it's only taking about between 50 and 70%, which might sound like a lot, but this is on ultra settings, to the highest settings, 800p, and as you would hope, we are literally having no performance issues whatsoever. I mean, to be fair, this game sometimes does have some significant performance issues, like really powerful hardware. It can have like stuttering or whatnot, so absolute fine experience. This is fantastic. I mean, it might get a bit harder if you're playing later levels or if there's a lot of AI on screen at once, but for the most part, this is absolutely fine. Can I ram you? Can I ram you? Yes, ram you. Yes. I may as well just keep on playing now until I finish the match, because we're almost done.
A few minutes later.
I came 5th because I'm an idiot. So this is the last game of the playable category I'm going to play. One thing I forgot to mention is that if you're going for a game, so example here, Battle for Bikini Bottom, if you want to see why a game isn't playable, because Valve do actually give reasons, which is really good. They didn't have to, but they did. So you go into the game itself, you go to game info, and then you click Steam Deck compatibility. And it will show you here a decent, obviously not every single reason, but it'll show you a decent amount of reasons as to why the game won't work. So here it's saying all functionality, shows Steam Deck icons, etc, etc. So basically everything works in this particular game apart from audio. So apparently there's some audio issues, but just because a game says playable doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad experience necessarily. It might just mean one or two very specific issues are present with the game, but everything else works fine. So it really just depends what you're willing to put up with. Without further ado, let's play Battle for Bikini Bottom, because again, I don't see why this wouldn't work. The last time I tried to play it portably, or it's kind of portably, is on my MacBook, and this was unplayable. It's like 720p, 15 FPS, more like 10ish, and completely unplayable on that. I'm expecting this to be a lot better. The Steam Deck has very impressed me so far when it comes to its ability to play games. So let's see if the Steam Deck does a pretty decent job. Hopefully it's going to be 800p 60 FPS. I'm just going to go and turn the music off, because Viacom is very aggressive when it comes to their intellectual property, so I'm not going to have any audio. I've got so many games in my Steam library I haven't played in years, and look at that, what did I say, 800p 60 FPS? It's not even maxing out the system either. This is a way better way to play this game than on the Switch version, for example, which I haven't actually obviously played that myself, but I've heard that has a lot of issues, and if SpongeBob would stop talking, I could actually explain how this works. I mean, at the moment, again, there might be some hitches and stuttering in like boss fights or certain areas, but so far this is a relatively dense and detailed part of the map, and it's running 60 FPS, absolutely no issues. I don't see any dropped frames of any kind, and when Valve initially came out and said every game would run at least 800p 30 FPS, I saw some people online get annoyed, because obviously they were like, what, it's only going to run 30 FPS? No, I mean, again, 30 FPS is the exception, not the rule on this. And what I really like is that Valve did not rely on FSR. Like, they easily could have designed the system so that, say, games would only run natively at 540p, and then FSR would upscale it. Because even on console, we used a lot of upscaling to get to, say, 4K and maybe even 1080p on something like the Xbox One or Xbox Series S. So I'm really glad that Valve actually made sure that all these games ran natively at 800p as opposed to with any kind of upscaling, because then that means that if you prefer it running native, then most of the games do actually work at native. But if you're somebody who's willing to put up with FSR and willing to have a little bit of visual sacrifice in order for better performance, you have that option. Valve has been really good at actually giving you options in how you want to play your games, as opposed to every other console manufacturer who tells you how you should play your games. Besides on phone, and that doesn't have physical controls unless you buy a controller for it and all the rest of it. This is a very decent way, and maybe even the best way to play this game portably. I'm very impressed with this. Meow. I'll let you guys be before I start making a whole bunch of SpongeBob memes. If you know me personally, I make SpongeBob memes like every day. Now, this is the untested part of the video where there's games that Valve just hasn't tested for whatever reason. So the first one I'm going to test for them is Undertale. The reason why I want to test this one is because, well, it runs on basically anything. I mean, there is a PS Vita port of this game. So if this doesn't run on the Steam Deck, that's a very big issue. And I don't see why it wouldn't, because not only does Undertale have a native Linux port, but it's also super easy to run, so this should be absolutely fine. Oh, there's the classic music. Oh, the Undertale soundtrack is so good. This game really holds up. A lot of it's like keyboard inputs. I do have a keyboard handy with me. If we have to, you can use that, but I'd rather not. So if my save's not here, I could just do the evil run and, you know, it wouldn't affect my main PC save. No, I'm not going to call it Kara. I'm going to call it Child. Oh, actually, no, I've got a better name now.
A few moments later.
There we go. I can't remember if that's how you spell it, but when I just said the child, it reminded me of Grogu from the Mando. And oh, yeah. Oh, that's actually really interesting, because this game technically runs at 480p. FSR is on. I never thought about that. So obviously this game runs at 30 FPS natively anyway, like it's supposed to run at 30, so don't expect, you know, 60 FPS out of this. The Steam Deck is actually upscaling it to 800p using FSR, so I actually find that really interesting. It doesn't look like it's made it look that much better by any means. See, so if it's integers, that's the native resolution of it. Nearest definitely looks better because it's designed to look blocky. Linear, no, it doesn't really look like it, but FSR on this doesn't really look that good either. It actually looks really sharp and really clear. I mean, I'm not really sure why they haven't tested Undertale. Like, Undertale is a massive game, and sure, it's not that popular anymore, but I mean, especially with Deltarune and everything, I'm very surprised that Valve hasn't hasn't tested this. So far, everything's working absolutely fine. Obviously, the only thing you can't do is configure the files, which if you've ever played Undertale before, you know that files, not important. Like, you can play the whole game without configuring the files, but the files and like the fourth wall breaks are kind of important. If this didn't run, I would be very shocked. Even the control stick feels quite nice. Probably not going to help me in the Sans fight by any stretch of the imagination. Wait, is that literally saying like 20% of the GPU's being used? How is that even possible? But I guess it's also these metrics are not completely accurate because the chip is doing a whole bunch of power saving and a whole bunch of configuration in the background. Obviously, I haven't gone extensively through all these games because I'm not a paid Valve employee, so I shouldn't have to. If I do run into any issues or if I find any significant thing that I didn't add in the video, I'll probably put it on Twitter or maybe in the comments, so check either of those if you want more info. On to the next game. So here we go. This is a game called Wii Tanks, as you can probably tell by the title. As I mentioned in my last video, if you're not sure what this is, first of all, a friend recommended it to me called Froggy, and you can go and check him out in the description or whatever I'm going to put it. This is a game basically based on the Wii Play game of, well, the same name. It was a mini game, a tanks mini game, so a lot of people called it Wii Tanks. I can't remember what the actual name is for it. It's a fun little tank game where you shoot each other and avoid holes and stuff, but somebody's made that into essentially a full game, and considering Nintendo's just sitting on that, they didn't even made an successor to Wii Play yet. Like, obviously they just announced Wii Sports, which Switch Sports, Wii Sports on the Switch, like I mentioned in my Nintendo Direct video, which again, all the stuff will be linked in the description. But this is actually a really cool game. It has a full campaign with like 100 levels or something. You got a survival mode. You can even make your own maps on it. So I really like it so far. Again, that's another cool thing about the Steam Deck is if I've played it on PC, then I can just straight up take it over. This is a relatively new game, so it's actually quite good to test because, okay, sometimes the controller menu works and sometimes it doesn't. Because it's a relatively new game, obviously Valve hasn't had time to optimize it, so, and it's an indie game. A pretty good example here of showing how, you know, clutch Proton is even without any direct optimization. Oh, I can use this to scroll up and down. Okay, that's pretty handy actually. I'll just use the trackpad then. So I haven't configured this at all. That's just showing just how out of the box this system is in terms of gaming mode at least, which is pretty cool. That was not intended. I mean, the controls seem to be working just fine for what you need it to. It's another game where you're going to have to use the touchscreen more than I would like. Oh, you actual wallaby. Yes, there we go. I'm actually doing slightly better than I was doing on my laptop with the trackpad, so there we are. But yeah, this is actually a really decent game, so go check it out on Steam. It's called Wii Tanks. I haven't tested most of the other game modes, but if this runs fine, then they should all run fine as well. Next game, I guess. Yes, look at me go. Now, I'm sure there are some of you that are wondering why I tested Muck instead of Crab Game, and this is the reason. Muck was labelled as playable, I think, whereas Crab Game is straight up unknown. I think this is the first time I've actually played this. I don't want microphone on. I should probably turn the audio off in case if somehow Netflix is like, you know, that's a bit too similar. 18 plus, what? How does that even make sense? Can I play this game single player or not?
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Oh, I can do practice. Well, hey, there we go. But yeah, they work. I mean, again, that's one of the really cool things. Like, Valve is really committed to community stuff. And so here, it will just download, I guess, the most popular community layout, do that for you. But yeah, so far, Crowd Game is working absolutely fine. Like, again, I'm no veteran to this game by any stretch of the imagination, and I have no idea all the strats and how to play this and everything. This is literally the first time I think I've actually booted up. So even untested games, like, you might think, oh, well, clearly they're not going to work then. Only games approved or tested by Valve will work. But in this case, Proton is working so well that, honestly, I haven't found a single game yet that doesn't work absolutely fine. There is one game I've got in mind, and we'll see how that works in a bit. I know this isn't the hardest game to run, and it's, you know, Unity-based game, so I don't know if Danny's ported it to Linux or not, but he did with Muck, at least, kind of. Don't know how well it works in the actual multiplayer mode, but half those servers are just weird. Kind of thought there'd be like an official server of some kind, but apparently not. I can't be bothered testing it in multiplayer. Oh, where's VSync off? There you go, see? So we've got everything on high. I could put it on ultra, but I can't be bothered. From my very, very limited testing, running absolutely fine. And the last game I'm going to test here is Cars. Now, this is probably completely out of the blue. That's exactly why I'm testing it. Not only is this actually a pretty decent game, all things considered, but this actually doesn't work on my laptop. Yeah, for some reason, I did manage to get it working on my desktop, but on my laptop, it straight up does not work. And when I mean don't work, I mean whenever I boot it up, it soft locks my computer and it has to restart. Shuts my computer down or restarts my computer because that's how broken it is on there. It's so weird. I don't know why that happens, and it's kind of scary to be honest, but let's see if the Steam Deck can come in clutch here, because I literally cannot play it on my laptop. If it runs well on the Steam Deck, then hey, this is the new way to play it, I guess. Well, I mean, we're in a FMV sequence, so that's a good sign. Okay, well, so far none of the buttons are working.
Later.
Okay, absolutely nothing is working apart from touchscreen. Again, the touchscreen comes in clutch for most of these. Okay, well, this game is going to need some configuring, so give me a minute.
More moments later.
And here we are. So I'm actually finally in gameplay now, because this is a keyboard game. Not only can I use the trackpad here as a mouse, but also I had to spend ages literally mapping every single button. But again, the fact that Steam allows you to do that is pretty darn cool. And it seems to work quite well. So even though I am using WSAD, it actually feels like it's analog. And Meta is really quick somehow. Got a couple of buttons, like I think I can do the back button here for power slide. This is working absolutely fine. Again, it's only at 30 FPS, but that's what this game was designed to run at, even though somehow it's using 80% of the GPU. Although saying that, you can't even hear the fan at the moment. Again, this doesn't run on my laptop. This Steam Deck may very well be the way I play like really old PC games. This is an old PC game that doesn't run on a lot of newer like Windows devices running on the Steam Deck. Ow, that was a bit rude of you, wasn't it, Meta? What's wrong with you? Oh, look at that. See, he's lost me half the race now. There might be some weird thing that breaks halfway through the game or whatnot. Well, here's one random issue I found, and that is for some reason it can't sync my save data to the cloud. On to the last game. Now, here's arguably the most interesting test of the video, because again, if we go to game info and then we go to details, Valve says straight up unsupported because of the stupid anti-cheat. I know anti-cheat is important to have because there are, well, people who are going to cheat and this is a competitive game, but to me, most of the time anti-cheat does more harm than it does actually good, and a lot of the time people still find ways around it anyway, so it makes just the experience for people who don't cheat just a bit more annoying. I don't really play multiplayer games, so it doesn't matter too much to me, but with that out of the way, let's see if this game does actually boot, or if Valve was correct in that it just will not boot at all, which is a shame because Dragon Ball FighterZ would be really good on a controller like this. Perhaps there might have been an update or something that Valve hasn't got around to changing, so let's see what happens.
One nap later.
And, oh, hang on. We're in a menu of some kind. Oh, okay, now it's booted us out. Okay, yeah, so from my testing, it seems to be that if Valve specifically says that a game isn't supported, then it probably isn't supported. But anything else, games that are unsupported run just fine, and games that even verified have their own issues. So as long as it doesn't say it's completely unsupported, your mileage may vary. You may as well give it a go, and gaming mode on the Steam Deck is amazing. Now, one other thing I wanted to try is running Journey through an external monitor. So this monitor here is 2560 by 1440p. Obviously the Steam Deck's native resolution is 800p, but at least in gaming mode, because the screen's only 800p, Valve have limited it so that you can't increase the resolution above that, at least for most games, deck verified games. Like some games you can, but most games you can't. So what I wanted to do is see how well FSR could essentially pick up the slack to upscale it to 1440p, and unfortunately the results aren't great. Like for example, if I go into the other scaling filters, so we have a look at say linear and then nearest and integer, because of the MSAA on Journey, none of them look great at all. Like you can definitely tell it's running at a lower resolution. It kind of looks really blurry as well. If you're playing like 2D pixel art, you know, platformer or something, that would probably look way better, but because of the MSAA, this looks pretty terrible. So when you put FSR on, FSR does make it look a lot better. I think even putting the sharpness up does actually help a lot as well, but even still, very obvious jagged edges, and it does make it look like it's running at say 900p, that kind of thing. At least for Journey in particular, FSR does work and it's definitely helping, but it certainly doesn't pick up the slack anywhere near as much, and it's not like a miracle worker or anything, unfortunately. Every time I record, I need to get better soundproofing because seagulls just scream and they scream and they scream all day long. They don't care that I'm recording, and it makes me very sad. Also, there's actually a lot of stuttering as well. Like, it's not unplayable by any means, but every now and again you'll see these huge spikes and stuttering. Hopefully the new FSR 2.0, which has just been announced, that will help a lot more. Sorry if the angling's a bit weird, but as you can see here, all I've got plugged in at the moment, this is my portable SSD here, so I was actually saving this for the Steam Deck, and I thought, oh, it'd be quite good to use this, because it's a terabyte, you see, so it'd be a lot easier than just buying the more expensive model. But, as you can see here, the only option you have is to format SD card. Now, I had a spare SD card lying around as well, but I've taken that out, so it's just this drive. But when I click format, are you sure you'd like to format it? Yes, I would. We've encountered an error of formatting your SD card, please try again. Now, obviously, this isn't an SD card, so I understand why it wouldn't work, but there is no option option in here at all for external drives. I've looked in SteamOS, I've tried formatting this in SteamOS with the file format, whatever you call it, program. I've tried doing it in here, I've tried everywhere, and so far I can't get a single external drive to work, only SD cards. I think I've seen some other person use USB drives, but I can't get any external drives to work, and that's really annoying because even the consoles, I'm not sure about the Switch in particular, but even like the PS4 and Xbox, they support external drives, so I have no idea why the Steam Deck wouldn't. The only reason I can think that they wouldn't support this is because they want you to buy the more expensive model, and although they have the SD card slot, if you've seen how much a terabyte SD card costs, it's like double the price of an external SSD, and it's slower. Completely pointless. I mean, obviously it's good it has an SD card slot, but if I had to trade the SD card slot for an external drive, I would. Apparently Valve aren't letting me, so I don't know why that's the case, but that's actually really annoying me, so hopefully I've just not found the right setting or something. If you know anything at all, leave it in the comments, but everything else about the Steam Deck is, or at least in gaming mode, is fantastic. This is a huge downside that I don't know why it's the case. I mean, sure, you're not going to be using this portably as such, but that shouldn't matter. I should be able to plug in whatever I want to my Steam Deck. Hopefully that gets fixed at some point. Our mind's just completely blanked. So that's the video. Overall, the gaming performance on the Steam Deck is actually really impressive. I'm honestly quite amazed at how much performance Valve have been able to squeeze into something of this size, and even more importantly, out of an APU. Now, as we know, it's based on the RDNA 2 architecture, and it's a custom CPU. I'm not sure if it's like a version of something like, I don't know, on the Xbox Series S, or if it's completely custom, like built from the ground up. But either way, the Steam Deck is a lot more console than I expected it to be. It is really, really impressive for what it can pull off, considering an Xbox Series S is supposed to be 1440p 60, but most of the time it's more like 1080p 60 FPS. So for this to run at 800p 60 FPS, it's not even that far off a Series S, which in theory has double the GPU power. Gaming is absolutely fantastic on here for the most part, although there are a few exceptions. In particular, Lego City Undercover, which by the way is actually a really decent game. Like, check it out if you haven't. And that ran terribly. That was running at like, 20 FPS or between like 20 and 30. I did have the settings cranked, but even then, like, that should have ran a lot better than it did. I mean, it runs at 30 FPS on the Switch, so Lego games you probably can't play that well. I haven't tried all of them. Games with anti-cheat, a lot of anti-cheats haven't been supported yet properly on the Steam Deck, so especially if you're a very multiplayer focused gamer, then this is not the best buy at the moment. You might be better off with like a Windows handheld, for example, because Windows runs terribly on this as well, at least as of recording. And weirdly, Poppy's Playtime. Now, I've actually made a video on this playing on a CRT, so if you're interested, go and watch that afterwards, because I really liked that video, but it didn't do that well, so well, it's not even ran terribly, it just didn't boot. As soon as you try to get into gameplay, it just crashes, and that's really confusing because I don't know why. Just a very quick one thing I did actually find about this game is that if I go into the settings here, properties, and then compatibility, under Proton 7.0-1, that's when it had all the issues, but when I put it into Proton Experimental, it seems to be working pretty much just fine. I only booted up for a couple of seconds, so it might be a bit more unstable, but I'd rather unstable but playable than you can't even get into the game itself. So I think for a lot of games that don't work out of the box, try experimental, and by the seams of it, it will work just fine. Yeah, it definitely isn't perfect. There are certain games that don't work, but then as we saw earlier, Cars works just fine. And that's a game that's like probably older than some of the people watching this video, so compatibility is still really good. Again, some games run better than they do on Windows. If you're looking to play older games in your library or more console optimized games, then you should be absolutely fine on this. But if you're looking to play certain niche titles, or especially, multiplayer games, then it might be worth waiting a bit, which then again, you have to anyway, because it's not like you have one yet. So yeah, overall, performance is actually really, really good, at least when the games work. And after this video, I'm going to make a video specifically on desktop mode. And I have quite a few things to say on desktop mode. It's not quite as good as I was expecting, so look out for that one. Subscribe, all the rest of it, and also, yeah, I'm wearing a coat now. You can't stop me. Yeah, didn't expect me to wear a coat, did you? Leave, I guess.